fact that these flowers are blooming and they're fertilized by the moths, and she's collecting something underneath that's producing some phytochemical that's going to protect them from. Now, did you have something specific in mind? Because I've been racking my brains.
Yeah, no, as a matter of fact, I didn't. I know there are plants like that, but I couldn't find one in a hasty search through the ecology of North Carolina, and I didn't have time to look very carefully. So I knew that, I just wanted it to be night when she was doing this for atmospherics, which is why I did that sort of phytochemical rather than the sort that reaches its maxima during the day, which would have been a lot easier.
Yeah.
And that's why I wasn't specific about what she was picking.
So I can relax.
Yeah.
So I have another. I couldn't decide which question to ask, but I'm going to squeeze them both in.
Okay.
Could you talk a little bit about Scrooge McDuck? Because I'm also a huge Scrooge McDuck.
Uncle Scrooge, yeah. Well, my mother taught me to read at the age of 3, in part by reading me Walt Disney comic books. Well, I never stopped. And around the age of 27 or so, I was reading one I picked up, and I said, well, this is pretty bad. I said, I bet I could do better than that myself. Anyway, in a moment of whimsy, I got the address of the editor of that particular line of comic books. I wrote him this very rude letter saying, dear sir, I've been reading your comic books for 20 odd years, and they've been getting worse and worse. I said, I'm not sure I could do better myself, but I'd like to try. Well, luckily I hit Del Connell, who was a gentleman and a scholar and a guy with a sense of humor. He wrote back and said, okay, try. And he very kindly sent me a format sheet so I could see how to lay out a script. And so I wrote him a story. He didn't buy it, but he did something much more valuable. He told me what was wrong with it. He did buy my second story, and I continued to write for him for about the next 3 years. At this point, the Disney company realized that they had 40 years of Karl Marx scripts in their file. Why were they paying people to write new ones? So they suspended their purchasing. That was the end of my comics career. But I really enjoyed that. There is a coda to this, which is the graphic novel. Let me say that, and then I'll get you. When graphic novels began to be popular a few years ago, I said to my agent, I really enjoy the comic format and all that. So if the chance ever occurs, I'd love to write a graphic novel. Well, no more than a week later, along comes Valentine Books, and it says they would like me to write a graphic novel, which is luck. They said what we wanted is a new Jamie and Claire story, rather than a straight adaptation of Outlander, but we wanted to kind of fit within the parameters of Outlander. I said, well, that's a challenge. Let me think about it. So I did. And I thought, Outlander is told entirely from Claire's point of view. And she is an Outlander, meaning she doesn't speak the language, she doesn't know anything about planet politics, she has very little grasp of what history is going on around her. There's a lot going on in Outlander that she didn't know, misunderstood, or simply wasn't aware of. And I said, what if I told her from someone else's point of view? So I thought about that. Well, you know what the front page of a comic book or a graphic novel looks like. It's got this one big panel at the top in which you set the scene. Well, the first panel in this particular graphic novel, which is called The Exile, by the way, it shows a thrashing sea and a lowering sky. There's a stark Scottish cliff at one side, and standing on the top of it is a little figure in a kilt leaning on his sword. Coming in across the ocean through the light and spray is a little ship. Well, this is Murtaugh, and he's waiting for Jamie to come back from France. So it's told largely from Murtaugh's point of view and partly from Jamie's, but you will see all the things that Claire didn't know. So you have a completely new storyline that weaves through the events of the book. So if you have read Outlander, and I'm assuming that most of you have, you will certainly recognize major events, but you will also get this completely novel storyline, which I think you will find interesting. So anyway, the artwork is great. It's due out in fall of 2010, and I say it's called The Exile, so I think you will enjoy it. Yes, the gentleman standing in.
First, could you summarize the questions that you're hearing from the front?
Yeah.
Because we're not getting them at all.
Oh, okay.
And then also, I was wondering, in Lord John, his, the contradictions between his sexuality and his acceptance of the moral ethics of the nobility. That you have that contradiction occur so beautifully. Where does that come from? Where does his attitude towards it and towards his behavior come from? Is that historical, or did you make it up?
Oh, where does Lord John's attitude toward his own sexuality come from, in contradistinction to the attitudes of the society surrounding him, which he is an integral part of? Well, I know a lot of gay men, and so some of it comes from them, of course. But I did research, the gay subculture in London through the second half of the 18th century and all that. A lot of them were, really here, and some of them were not. Some were deeply closeted, but in the higher nobility, it did occur with a fair amount of regularity. the reason for Lord John's acceptance is that he is a rationalist. You know, he was raised by a father who was of a scientific bent, you know, and he asks questions. And as he says to his lover in one book, his lover was raised by a religious fundamentalist, you know, and he thinks they're damned, you know, because that's what he's always been told. And he asked John, you know, well, are you not afraid of this yourself? And John says, well, no. He said, you know, I'm always told that that God made man in his own image. He said, therefore, I can't think that God is any less reasonable than I am. He said, it makes no sense to me to create people who are damned by the nature of your own laws. He said, does this not seem like a wasteful idea? And his friend is quite struck by the idea of a thrifty God. But to Lord John, you know, that's the way he could dope it out, so obviously this makes sense, and therefore, you know, he's just in a difficult position, but he certainly accepts who he is, because, you know, he knows what he is. But to have someone who embodies that kind of conflict, you know, who appreciates and accepts his own nature while living in constant danger of what will happen to him when anyone finds out, you know, this argues for a very complex and a very strong character, and therefore he's fascinating to me. So, yeah, I know not everyone is a Lord John fan, but he does have quite a lot of very violent fans, you might say. Yeah. Yes, the lady here.
I was interested in the balance of how much time you spend in research versus the actual writing process.
Oh, how much time do I spend in research versus the actual writing? Well, I can't really say because I do it all at once. I don't write with an outline, as I said, and I don't write in a straight line. Consequently, I don't plan the books out ahead of time, and I have no idea what I'm looking for. So I begin, you know, with the research, but I also begin with the writing immediately. Because what I said to myself was, the point here is not to learn everything about Scotland in the 18th century. The point is to learn how to write a novel. So I'm going to start writing immediately, and if I write something that turns out later to be wrong, I'll just fix it. You know, nobody's going to see this anyway. I'm out plenty of time. And so I've always proceeded on that assumption that the writing was as important, if not more so, than the research. And they kind of feed off each other. You know, I will begin writing a scene, and I will realize I need to know some little bit of information. Well, I have a huge reference collection, so I'll go look for whatever it is. And in the course of that, I will almost always turn up some other little detail that triggers some other thought, which is either another scene or another bit of this one. And so they sort of feed off each other in a circular way. In the early part of a book, I will be doing a lot of research and a lot of thinking because I don't know very much yet. And the writing doesn't go very far on any given day. I may only get half a page, but I aim for one or more. And as I move into what I call the walking phase of the book, which is the middle 18 months or so, I aim for around 1,000 words a day, which is, you know, 2 to 3 hours of concentrated work, plus, you know, then whatever research and thinking and so forth I'm doing. And toward the end of a book, when I hit what I call the final frenzy, this is when I've actually seen the shape of the book. I know where I'm going, and all the shape of the missing pieces. At that point, I'm usually working flat out 12 or 14 hours a day and hardly sleeping or eating. In the final frenzy of Echo in the Bone, which, by the way, I finished writing 6 weeks ago. Perhaps 4 weeks ago. Wow. Yeah, yeah, we came right up to the hairy end on this one. But anyway, during the final frenzy here, I actually stayed up all night 4 times in the last month of writing it. I was kind of pleased to find that at my age I could still do that. If I want to. Yeah.
I'm interested in knowing what describe the room where you do your writing and some of the conditions around it. And if it's not too personal. And then when you say like you're up all night, I mean, yeah. I want to know things like, are you getting up and getting a snack and going back and getting right back up where you left it before the Triscuit, you know?
Oh, yeah. The sort of the physical conditions of how I write, you know, what's my room look like and what's my actual routine. Well, I actually live in 3 different places. Our main house is in Scottsdale, and there I have a loft office with French windows that look out over the McDowell Mountains, which is very nice. And I write with, in all 3 places, I have the same physical setup. It's an ergonomic chair because I have arthritis in my neck, and if I need to sit for 12 or 14 hours, I need this. And I have an adjustable tilt-top table. It's a little tiny table that only holds my laptop, you know, and a pen and notebook. That's about it. And so I adjust that, and I have an ottoman to prop my feet up because I can't write with my feet on the floor. And so I have the same setup in all houses. The other place is in Santa Fe. My husband and I have a small place over there that we go to for a week or so every month. And I grew up in Flagstaff, Arizona, and I still own my old family house up there. So I have another small office in the upstairs there. So yeah, my writing setup per se is the same in all 3 places, though the surroundings vary quite a bit in terms of what the room actually looks like. My room in Scottsdale, which is my main place, has built-in floor-to-ceiling bookshelves all down one side of the room.